welcome to the U.S. mission to the United Arab Emirates podcast, Stars, Stripes, and Insights. And today we have a very special program planned for you. It is a journey into the very early days of our bilateral friendship and partnership with the United Arab Emirates, or rather, with the people that were here even before the United Arab Emirates became a country. We have a very special guest with us, Dr. Scott Kennedy, who is here to talk about the legacy of his parents, Dr. Pat and Marion Kennedy, who came to Al Ain with their 4 children in 1960 to establish what became the first modern medical facility here in Al Ain. And really, beyond just providing care and love for the people of Al Ain, they also started our bilateral friendship. And there is no one better to speak about those early days in our bilateral ties than Dr. Scott Kennedy. So Dr. Kennedy, welcome. Thank you for sharing with us some of your memories of those early days in our bilateral ties. And I would like to ask you, what brought your parents here to Al Ain, and what are your recollections of those early days?
Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming to the heart of the UAE. And the questions you ask are, to answer them are, bring up a storybook to tell you. But I will tell you then that my father first got interested in mission work when he was in World War II. And his ship went into Japan after the bombs dropped, and he decided at that time he wanted to come to help out in a country that had been devastated. But he then met a lady in medical school, Dr. Miriam, and together they ended up, cutting through a lot of history here, they ended up in southern Iraq working with the Marsh Arabs in southern Iraq in the late 50s, when the ruler was assassinated and we had to leave the country in a hurry. All Americans were ushered out, and we went to Beirut, where my brother and sister were born, and then we came to Jordan. And while working in Jordan, this urgent message came from right here in Al Ain, from Sheikh and Sheikh Zayed, who had done their homework, who had checked out a mission hospital in Bahrain and also in Muscat, 2 American mission hospitals, and they decided they wanted to get some American doctors here. So a petition came to my father, and he flew down in 1959 for an interview with Sheikh and Sheikh Zayed, who was in charge of the Eastern Province at the time. And it was, my father says, the interview went very short. It was delightful, and basically Sheikh Zayed said, "When can you come?" And I would like to add here, in the preparation before coming here, my parents had studied Arabic in Iraq, had studied Arabic in Lebanon, and studied Arabic in Jordan. So they came quite prepared, except they did have to learn the wonderful Bedouin dialect here, which was certainly something they enjoyed. So that was the beginning when Sheikh Zayed said to my father, when my father said, "Well, where would we work?" And Sheikh Zayed said, "See that guest house over there, that white guest house? You're going to be living there. You're going to live there, and you can run a clinic on the opposite side of the compound where deliveries would happen." And that's the beginning of them coming here. It was by request.
Well, thank you. I mean, your short review of those early days really bring up so many questions in my mind. One being sort of what happened once you moved into this white guest house, and which of course eventually led to a real hospital, the Oasis Hospital, which is of course now has been transformed and now is known as the Kanad Hospital, with which many, I think, are familiar, but those who are not are in for a treat if they join us for this podcast. So tell us a little bit about the Oasis Hospital in those early days. What did that look like? What did you experience? How old were you? And, how did you and your brothers and sisters fare here in Al-Ain?
What a question. I'm each time I go down this storyline, it touches me deeply. I'm actually see it as a miraculous time. It's a storybook telling, because it's about a time 2 doctors arrive without a stethoscope. Maybe they had a stethoscope, but 4 little children. The youngest was my brother Doug, who is 1.5. So we're all very young. 2 doctors without any medical equipment arriving at this white compound, and no laboratory, no pharmacy, no blood bank, no running water, no electricity, certainly no ice cream, no air conditioning, so it goes on and on. So how in the world did this ever take off? And I present that when I speak in public a lot, and it's really fascinating to tell this story, so I thank you for asking it. I'm still mesmerized by it, because how did they get going? Who is their procurement officer? They suddenly arrive, and as you know, there was, as Sheikh Mohamed spoke a few weeks ago with POTUS, 1 out of 2 babies were dying at birth, sometimes even more. Each month it was scary, and mothers were at risk too. 1 out of 4, sometimes 1 out of 3, and it was scary to be pregnant and to have the delivery. So the urgency was there, and suddenly you arrive on a compound wanting to help. 2 doctors, young, and they were both, by the way, very talented doctors. I found out 1 year before my mom died that she graduated #1 in her class out of UC Berkeley. They had to have incredible out-of-the-box thinking to work here, because you didn't have internet, you didn't have support services, you didn't have ancillary help. You had to make decisions in a busy clinic every day. And as I review as a physician, I'm astounded by the quickness and the diversity of their how they handled the wide population, sometimes 300 patients arriving in the morning. And you would then ask, how's that impression on us? Well, we didn't have a telephone operator. So our house was central, it was central to all communication, and our doors were wide open. So we were imbued from the very beginning by the culture, 24/7, knocking on the door, and we saw the love they came with and the love my parents had, and the commitment and the joy that was brought, and what they learned, learning about the culture, learning what they liked and what they didn't like, and they had to be quick learners. My father, for instance, did not let my mother go out at nighttime to deliver a baby, so my father would go out, and he had some incredible stories of being out in the desert and getting stranded and coming back, the next morning. No telephone. So we learned to love their hospitality, to love these people. And they always welcomed us into their homes. Kids were always invited, right from the beginning. So I remember them bringing eggs in the morning. They brought mangoes, all these things you remember as a kid, and remember their hospitality. Yesterday I was at the presidential palace, and a guy sitting next to me who was born in 1957, 58, a distinguished gentleman, tells me about how he used to come to our Christmas parties on the compound. And he says, I came to the church service, but I liked the sweets they served. I liked the chocolates. And he remembers coming to the services because we were allowed definitely to have these nice services, and people came. Of course, there were chocolates out there, and they remember this. They remember the joyful music. We also went caroling. They like to pick that up again, too. We went caroling to all the compounds, and they loved it. So there was an openness. But it all goes back to Sheikh Zayed, his pragmatic approach to this, his visionary, not scared for 1 second about outsiders coming in, basically saying, save lives and do what you got to do. So it does beg the question, who was the procurement officer for my mother and father? How could they do surgery? They didn't have anesthesia, they didn't have instruments. How could they do it? As a physician, I'm appalled. I mean, how did that happen? And they had no blood bank. And of course, with obstetrics, you're dealing with a lot of sudden need for blood. placenta previa, placenta abruptio, and he needed blood. And who was the blood bank? That was my mother, O negative. And she gave and gave and gave to the point where at one time my father said, we're out of here, because her hemoglobin had dropped really low. But through the whole process, it was Sheikh Zayed who procured equipment for us and had a go-between to get us water brought in from the village, electric. We had lamps brought in for cesarean section in nighttime. We had everything. He had a go-between. It would administer to our needs, and then we started getting stuff from Denmark, antibiotics, equipment brought in from Denmark. I mean, Sheikh Zayed bringing this stuff in. It was amazing. So yeah, he was the hero. He was the visionary. Without him, my parents would have never made it.
What a remarkable story. And really, I mean, it's a story of courage. It's a story of devotion to serve the community in which you found yourself in. But just also a story of grit. You know, you listed a long list of things you didn't have or your parents did not have. And yet somehow, with the support of His Highness Sheikh Zayed, they managed. And they really managed to become part of this community. As you said, you know, you have folks that were born or were children around that time remembering their early years here, and to meeting your parents, being welcomed by your family into celebrations, whether it be Christmas or other. It's clear that the community really embraced you, and you embraced the community. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little more about your parents and the values that they shared with you and taught you and your siblings, because I can tell you're visibly touched by remembering this really remarkable story. And so maybe you could share with our viewers and listeners some of the values that you believe were really critical for your parents as they embarked on what is an adventure, but it was, of course, a really tough time for them.
Wow, that's a great question, Ambassador. Well, again, we were imbued by them as we were with the local culture, living with them, seeing their actions. Their actions lead the way. We did have our quiet times to share internally our faith with each other, and we had a fellowship on the compound which was quite international. I never thought of things in terms of denominations. We'd get together with people from all walks of life, from England, from Switzerland. We had nurses from Switzerland, we had nurses from Germany, from Canada, from Harley Street, and we'd gather together and remind ourselves what we were doing, what we were there for. And we invited everybody to come, especially the church gatherings. And the neat thing about it, Sheikh Zayed was totally, save the lives, be happy, and share your, he was okay with that. The way to answer a lot of this is with storylines. So I can tell you our compound where we live, my dad put up a fence right away, and we, for instance, in our compound, we had gazelle, we had foxes, we had peregrine falcons, and indeed one day the nurses gave my mother a gift for her birthday in April, and it was a donkey with a big bow tie on it. I mean, a big bow on it. I didn't tell you this, though, that in the desert they would sometimes have these traps, and they would trap the gazelle or trap the foxes, beautiful red foxes, and they'd bring them into my father, which is crazy. So we got a clinic there for human beings, and it's packed, and now we're bringing in animals. And that's a story in itself. But they would bring in a fox with an iron clamp on it, and my dad, we'd take it to surgery. I actually assisted him, and he'd have to amputate a leg to save the fox because it had gangrene. And we had 2 foxes that were 3-legged foxes in our backyard. My dad built a den for them to sleep in, and they come in. But in the early days, they slept in bed with us. They'd come and cuddle. They were very cuddly. When they got older, they were a little bit different personality. They eventually went free. We had gazelle, 3-legged gazelles too, and we had a peregrine falcon. I just remember we always had a presence of the local people. And in the clinics then, so I would remember assisting my father with these busy clinics, including suddenly these interruptions for the Sheikh coming in, and also suddenly they bring a peregrine falcon. And what's my dad going to do with a peregrine falcon who has a really bad infection of the sinuses? You don't have the internet, you don't have a specialist, and so he improvised. And what he did was put drops in their little nares, and it really worked. He just was able to improvise with. And I remember one time a cow came in. I'm sorry to go sideways here. It was a cow, and it was pregnant, and it was doing a busy clinic. My dad had to say, get it to the side of the hospital. We'll take care of it at the busy clinic. So around 5 p.m., he sent me out, and I was trying to deliver a stillborn cow, and we couldn't turn it around. And eventually, my dad had to calculate up the anesthesia based on human physiology. And we put the cow to sleep, and we did a cesarean and took out a stillborn calf to save the mother. Okay, that's good and dandy, except the medicine my father used kept the cow asleep for about 6 hours afterwards. It was a different dose than you would give in veterinary medicine. It still had a good outcome, but we had to roll with laughter that we saved the cow, but we put him to sleep using human physiology standards to deliver this cow.
Imperfect calculation, but
so it was. This kind of stuff happened all the time. I have a camel came in with a big soft tissue tumor on the chest, and the Bedouins want it removed. And my father, he's known for always wanting to help, even though he wasn't really sure what he could do. So we ended up, after hours, laid the camel down on the sand dune in a rosette fashion, and we had a rope tied around each leg as my father got in the middle and tried to use a nerve block to numb up this site, to cauterize and cut off this soft tissue tumor which was bothering the camel. And he did it. Sent it in. It was benign. But at the end of the day, the camel would have lived whether he did it or not. What mattered is, culturally, they saw that as a very caring doctor.
Yes, right.
That they could go to.
I mean, you speak about your father and mother, of course, always being willing to help, whether your mom being so devoted that she would have given all her blood away, or your father after hours treating humans, livestock, animals from the desert. It really paints a vivid picture of who they were as individuals. And of course, it's clear based on my time here and my conversations, including with His Highness Sheikh Mohamed, that your parents were deeply, deeply admired and loved, as you mentioned, by everyone who came to know them. And I was so touched, to be honest with you, when I heard His Highness Sheikh Mohamed tell President Trump during the recent visit about those early days in our friendship and how those early days were shaped by your parents. And I know that this was not the only recognition that was accorded to them. And of course, it's well-deserved, because your parents really did something remarkable here. And first and foremost, for the people who came to see them from all across the deserts surrounding Al Ain. But they've also done something remarkable for the friendship between the United States and United Arab Emirates and the people. And, hearing Sheikh Mohammed talk to President Trump about your parents, it really made me feel very, very proud. And I'm sure that you felt the same. But tell me maybe a little bit about some of the honors that were given to your family to recognize the legacy of your parents. And you were telling me a little bit before the podcast about some of the more recent ones. And I think our listeners would enjoy that.
We've been honored constantly from His Highness. I was in there to see him yesterday, and just the glow and the gratitude we give to him, but backwards, it's just amazing. I mean, he mentioned during the visit with President Trump that the Abu Dhabi Award, the first edition, came out in 2005, and it was given at the Emirates Palace. My sister is receiving that award. and we've been given many awards. Sometimes award was a gift and whatever, but I would be remiss not to tell you that there was a tremendous amount of humor in all this too. We're working with what people don't realize is that Sheikh Zayed he was an arborist. He loved trees. He loved to study trees. He knew the trees. And my dad was likewise an arborist. And even though we're in the desert, they loved green. So they were really preoccupied with greenery, as you can tell from the country. And they were also very much, Sheikh Zayed could tell you every name of every creature that crawled on top of the sand dune. Amazing understanding of the tracks. And he was very curious about their toxicity, like of a scorpion. So my father paid my brother and I 1 rupee, which is about 1 dirham, to go out and capture a scorpion near the mountains here in the daytime because they're nocturnal. And we go out and capture scorpions, pull over the rocks, capture them with my father's forceps, put them into a plastic bag, Ziploc bag. He told us how not to get stung by them. And we put 2 drops of water into a Ziploc bag, and then bring him back, and my father would mail him in a cardboard tube to University of Arizona in Tucson for a toxicology study. But what I didn't tell you, this is back in the 60s, it would go by sea freight. 5 to 6 months later, arrive at University of Arizona, scorpions alive and well, study them, and within weeks we get an aerogram back saying what the toxicology was. None of them were really fatal here like we get in other parts of the world, but we learn about the little yellow ones, the little black ones, the dark ones, the scorpions, and then he reported to the ruler. And it was a very warm, wonderful relationship that way, discussing the desert life, and sort of streams in the desert that came out of the desert, because he wanted to greenerize the place. Tremendous humor in all this process. Tremendous humor. See, the awards were, to answer your question about awards, they were just abundant. And so after, for instance, just an example, after the President Trump's visit about 10 days ago, I get called to the street here. Dr. Kennedy, come out to the street. Actually, it was Tara called me and said, get out to the street. And there I saw a bunch of Egyptian workers pulling up the signs of the road that encircles the hospital. And they're yanking up the sign, and they're putting in a new sign. And you'll see it when you drive out of here. It says Pat and Marion Kennedy. And who in the world would have known to do that? In Virginia, where I'm from, it would take 2 years to get that done with the Department of Transport. And here in 1 hour, the ruler, with such a sensitive thought, realizing that everybody knows the hospital is Kanad, that's the nickname of my father, but now in the modern age, how about telling them the name of Pat and Marion Kennedy? So the timing of it was tough. I had tears out there as they're putting up these signs for Pat and Marion Kennedy encircling the hospital. Not for my ego, but for the memory of my mother and father.
I mean, again, just another lovely story that evokes how deeply His Highness Sheikh Mohamed feels about your parents and all that they have done for his family and the people in Al Ain. I'm curious because I know you followed in your parents' footsteps. You too have devoted your life to service and to healing. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about your journey.
Well, I went on to medical school, the same medical school my father went to and my sister went to in Philadelphia. I went into family medicine, and as I signed up for the U.S. State Department as a medical officer, regional medical officer, and I served in Africa and the Middle East. And it was a joy, and it was one of the things the State Department always wants to do is make sure a doctor who comes on board can handle life overseas. Well, that was not really hard. It was fun. The first tour was in Kenya, and I was regional, and I covered most of Africa one time, and then I came back, spent 5 years in Yemen, did a tour in Riyadh, where you were, and I did 5 years in Jordan, and then with all this commitment, I still made 73 trips back to here. So all roads eventually came back to here, and that's where I am now. So I did a whole career, but I can tell you that I learned more about follow-up and listening with patients from my mother and father than I learned in medicine, in medical school. Medical school was good, but I was assisting my father in surgery when I was in high school, to the horror of the nurses here. But I was assisting him with minor gallbladders and hernia repairs, and he taught me the sterile technique. He taught me. He always had a prayer beforehand, prayed before. I liked that, and they loved it. And then the follow-up. So this is a fascinating thing. So we're mainly known for obstetrics gynecology here, but also extending out more. But we have a great outreach program that Sheikh Mohamed knows about, and he's encouraged us to continue. It sets us apart from all other hospitals where we go out and visit. There's not a cost. This is out of our heart to go and visit. We have a women's group and men's group sometimes combined to go visit. Not only on Eid, but families that are needy, families we know, legacy families that go back 6 decades. We go and visit, and it's been a joy. And that is a pattern established by my mother and father, and that's a pattern that's inculcated into my makeup, to go visit, always follow up. And when you follow up with patients, sometimes we don't have time for this in the United States, but here, to go out and follow up, you catch something maybe going south, maybe the pneumonia is not getting better, and you have better outcomes if you follow up, especially after triplets go home. And we found out that we were not seeing postpartum depression here, because our people were going out and visiting these mothers, and they were surrounded by family, of course, but we also had a presence in their lives early on. So in terms of their influence on my medical practice, history is very important. Picking a history, listening to their culture, listening to them. They say they have a problem hearing, and you could think, well, is that from loud noise from a concert? But maybe it's from the desert and sand. And you got to listen. And then you look in the ears, and then you have to, irrigate them out, and suddenly they can hear. So listening is very important, and follow up with them, and have better outcomes than we have in the United States. We're bragging a very good NIC unit here. We're one of the best in the whole Arabian world now with our neonatal intensive care unit. So we're very proud of that. But thanks for asking the question. I do want to mention something you would love to hear. It's about my mother. She was a demure personality, much in the way like you are, very strong but demure, and knew her domain here, but when she needed to confront, she could confront. So we were not allowed, we only had one car in the early days, and my mother pretty much developed a pattern where she would go visit the ruler called the al-Shuyukh, the ruler of Sheikh Zayed and Sheikh Boot. And her name was Sheikh Salama. And my mother would go to see her at least 4 times a week. Well, sometimes it was very hard to get there because my father was busy with clinics and others. So one day, she hopped in the Land Rover, set the pattern, and she told the policeman that was looking at her, "I'm going to see the ruler's mother. If you want to stop me, go ahead, but it's the ruler's mother." And my mother had that way to basically told the police, "Don't stop me," but in a very polite way. And that was the beginning of women driving in the Emirates.
Oh my goodness.
Years before Saudi Arabia.
Right.
A lady in the desert driving to see Sheikh Salama. Of course, she was also big on getting people to learn how to donate blood. There was a fear of donating blood in the early days, which came from the fear of the jinn. And I don't ever remember my mother ever getting angry, except when there was a gentleman, usually a husband, who wouldn't give blood to a wife. And so the education process was on, and learning how to give blood, because she was giving way too often. If there was one low point where we almost sort of had to abandon ship here, was when my father determined my mother's hemoglobin was down to 6, and it was time to go.
Right.
That was resolved. The other thing that was really hard on us was boarding school.
Yes.
But coming back here was always a joy. Our house was heaven. Sorry, I went sideways on that.
So thank you again. I mean, every recollection and every story that you're sharing with us is truly special, because it paints such a vivid picture of those early days in your life, in the life of your family, and the presence that they brought to the UAE. And of course, it represents an early and a really wonderful chapter in our bilateral relationship. But I'm wondering, given what you've shared about your parents and how at home they felt here, how do you think they would feel now, given how the UAE has been transformed in so many different ways over the past 6 decades?
I like to think they're here constantly. I feel, well, I talk to the people. I feel their presence. A 93-year-old gentleman came up to me the other day and told me this story. He was the one bringing eggs to the house back in by donkey every day, brought eggs to our house. And so the traditions are still here, the family tradition, especially in Al Ain. We have the family gatherings here are amazing. They work in Abu Dhabi, a lot of the boys come back here, but the family is here on the weekend. And I love that tradition. So moving into the modern age we are, and for sure, medical care, into space, and artificial intelligence and everything, but not to forget the value of the family and the integrity of the family, basically the fabric of our society, which is here, and Sheikh Mohamed knows that. So the answer to your question, we are moving forward on many fronts, but I think my mom and dad would be very happy with the fact that when you go out to visit, it's still the same warm hospitality. The mother is incredibly in charge, and there's a lot going on, and they're keeping it going. And so I love the fact that traditional family is cohesive, respectful of mother, really. And I see that, and I love that. I know my mom and dad look down very favorably on that, knowing that the country has moved forward on so many fronts. And I mean, my father would be tickled pink by all the greenery along the road now, the drip irrigation, all the gardens that are coming up, and it's beautiful what's going on. So, very good question, though.
So clearly you mentioned that there were others who then came along later and supported your parents, supported you in the work of the hospital. I had heard about Dr. Latifa, who, as you just mentioned, was one of the people who was here with you. Could you tell us a little bit about the staff that made things happen here?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you, because in this discussion I cannot not give gratitude and recognition for these nurses that were supporting my mother, who particularly was focused on obstetrics and gynecology. And so with that demand 24/7, she was very good at training these nurses, all of them, in taking care of the obstetrical cases, the more routine ones. And we had, these nurses were not only super in the obstetric field at the end, like midwives, like Gertrude Dick, also known as Latifa, Nancy Brock, Margaret Paisley, Helen Parrott. I can go on and on. They were also not only nurses here, they also helped take care of the Kennedy children. When my mom and dad were busy, they would come down and babysit us, be with us, and they were tied up with a tough cesarean section or a tough delivery all night. Gertrude would come down, Nancy Brock was over. We had all these nurses. I'm remiss for not naming them all, but they're up here on the walls, and they were wonderful. I remember a nurse from Switzerland, we called her Auntie Esther, who is a real outdoors person. And we had a nurse from Harley Street in London, Barbara Michaelis, and they would always take us out hiking, and great nurses. But we'd also go out with my mom, who was quite outdoors person, and we went out with them. But without them, I don't think my mom could have made it. The tremendous load, obstetrical load, 24/7. So yeah, I have to tell you a funny one though. So one night in the 1980s, I got called up by the nurse. The nurse calls me I was on call out of medical. I was in my residency actually, and I got called up. I was on call for OB, and I got called up by one of the nurses to help with a complicated delivery. So I walked up to the hospital here, and at the door of the delivery room, two ladies stopped me from going in. And I didn't have gray hair at the time. They didn't think I should be in there. It was a man going in. I was young, and nope, they wouldn't let me in. until somebody inside the room said, "Oh, that's Walid Miriam." And suddenly it was a passport in. So I didn't get in on my own merit. I got in because
Of your
I
mom.
love my mom and dad. Subsequently, about a year later, I got called in at New Year's Eve. And it's another delivery. It's a 38-year-old lady with 16 babies and underbelly. And I go to help her. And it's all going well. But I looked at the clock. It's New Year's Eve. And it's literally 60 seconds before New Year's Eve. And there's a rule in the country. I knew it. So I asked her, this is kind of mean of me, but I asked the mom, if you don't mind, can I just, it's the baby's crowning, but can I hold for 60 seconds? Indeed, she held, and we delivered that baby right seconds after midnight.
So the first baby of that year.
First baby of the year gets free care for all the family, all the hospitalization, everything for free. So, a little bit of fun was put into play, and they loved it. I have a picture of the whole family now.
That's terrific.
So, having a little bit of fun with them. But those nurses were phenomenal.
So tell us about the Kanad name. How did that come about?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So right from the beginning, when they came to the house, because we had no operator, they'd always knock on the door. And my room was right near the front of the house. With my brother and I shared a room at the front. Kanad. And the bedroom would come in from the desert, way out. And of course, it was urgent. And so we'd go back and get my father out of the bedroom, come up, and he would have to then go out remote someplace to deliver a baby.
Okay.
But over time, everybody, all the taxi drivers, everybody knew the hospital, not Mustashfa al-Waha, which is
Right.
Oasis Hospital, as Kanad. You've got on a taxi, they would not know what Oasis Hospital was. So the nickname, they didn't say Kennedy, they said Kanad. And so it kind of came to the point in late 2019, right before Christmas, I get a call from the Abu Dhabi media, directed of course by Sheikh Mohamed, and basically said, come over quickly, all the children, come over. Two days before Christmas, we got ushered over here, we fly over here for a surprise. And we're not allowed to come to the hospital. We're put up in a hotel downtown. And the next morning they courier us in by convoy to this hospital here, right here, with big velvet curtains. And Sheikh Mohammed had chosen that day to change the hospital's name. He'd done a lot of study with the arts and everything, from Mustashfa al-Waha to Mustashfa Kanad. And I mean, we were sitting there. I was crying with my sister. Touching. So they changed the name to the people's name. And it immortalizes forever the name of their service. So that was touching. We had nothing to do with it, because people said, did you, Scott Kennedy, no, I had nothing. I had nothing to do with the sign change. That's all driven by the incredible sensitivity, kindness, love of the ruler, who was born here, by the way. And I didn't tell you about his birth, though, did I?
No, you did not, but please.
So I had the chance to tell this to Sheikh Fatima 3 weeks ago, Emirat, who is an amazing lady. She reminds me, she doesn't look like she looks just as youthful as she was when I knew her in the late 60s.
She's a formidable leader.
Oh my goodness. And she is still she hands me one thing and she says, well, take this and take this, and take her hospitality unsurpassed. So anyways, she was in that compound, that guest house, in for delivery. It was a high-risk pregnancy, and my mother had followed her daily for the whole duration of the pregnancy. And she came in, and I was only, I was a young boy out in the sand dune, kicking around in the red sand dune, around a tent outside. It was a royalty tent. And suddenly I heard this boom and a rifle fire on a horse, and it was Sheikh Zayed on top of a white horse. I didn't even know it was Sheikh Zayed. It was just a charismatic, handsome man with other horses, rounds of fire like they do in Texas, and going off, and there was the ululating going on, the real sharp, shrill sound of joy coming from within. And my sister came to the door and said, Scott, Sheikh Fatima had a healthy baby boy. We didn't know his name, but it was Sheikh Mohammed, future ruler of the country.
Oh my goodness. So
What a story.
You're right. You remembered the day he was born.
It was my movie.
What an incredible life you've had. And really, I mean, it had followed in parallel with the journey of this country. And it's, again, for me, such a privilege and joy to hear stories such as yours, your parents, because it really evokes to me what is special about our bilateral relationship is that we have tried to do everything that your parents were doing, out of this calling that they had, commitment to service, and devotion to the community in which they were. I really enjoyed everything that you shared with us, and it's a privilege to know you. Thank you, Doctor.